Let me tell you fellas a story. Once upon a time, there were two brothers named Chad and Jared Moldenhauer. These boys loved video games and had a dream of one day making a game of their own. Unfortunately, life caught up with these boys, and they watched as their dream was slowly slipping away. Until it wasn't, and in 5 years they went on to create one of the greatest games of all time and one of my personal favorites, Cuphead. Guys, welcome back to Casual Perspective. Hayden here, and today I'm gonna be telling you why I fucking love Cuphead, and you should too. Cuphead is a run and gun slash boss rush game with an incredibly unique art style. The game was released back in 2017 with its DLC, The Delicious Last Course, releasing in 2022.
I didn't realize it took them 5 years to release the DLC, holy shit.
The story of Cuphead follows two brothers, Cuphead and Mugman. These two brothers had always dreamt of murdering every last goofy, zany character in their little island home in hopes of impressing and one day joining the devil to rule in hell. Nah, I'm just kidding. That'd be pretty neat though. Now, Cuphead and Mugman are just two mischievous little cup people who get a little overconfident in the casino and gamble away their souls to the casino's owner, the devil. Obviously, the guys aren't too stoked on this and beg to keep their souls. The devil, being the cool guy that he is, offers the boys a deal in that if they bring back the souls of all of his debtors, they can keep their own. Man, don't you just fucking hate when that happens? And with that, we have our game. Time for Cup and Muggy to go out there and fuck shit up.
We're here to fuck shit up.
The main game is broken up into 3 different island worlds, with the DLC making up the new 4th island. You're free to wander around each island as you wish and pick your next fight. A new island is unlocked after collecting each soul contract,
Beating each boss.
on the previous island. The game continues on this way until you make your way back to the casino to confront the big man himself, Santa Claus. No, I'm just kidding, it's the devil. In the main game, you basically have 3 options: boss fights, run and gun levels, or mausoleums. Main game is comprised of 19 bosses, 6 run and gun levels, and 3 mausoleums. The DLC adds an additional 7 bosses and the King's Leap boss gauntlet. Boss fights are exactly what they sound like, you versus a boss. These come in different varieties like standard fighting on foot, airplane fights, and fights with continuous moving platforms and shit. Bosses are broken up into different phases with 3 or more for each fight. Each phase usually changes up the patterns and nature of the fight significantly, so the fights stay fresh. A handful of bosses also have a secret hidden phase that completely changes up the fight. One example is not shooting the onion in the root pack fight to trigger the radish phase. Or the complete change in storyline of the Sally stage play fight if you kill the husband.
Ooh.
Bosses also don't have a health bar. Your only indicator of how you're doing in the fight is the phases themselves, as these change after you've done enough damage. Of course, if you fail a level, Cuphead also offers its iconic progress bar to show you just how close you came to beating the stage.
Nope.
Are
You serious?
On your first playthrough, seeing this will feel like you have a Buzz Lightyear shoved up your ass, with wings expanded. You can't tell by the gameplay, these fights are a feast for the eyes, nothing short of true spectacle. Everything feels very on brand for the fantastical and crude vibe of the Cuphead world. And it's so cool to see what each new fight brings to the table. The bosses almost all have a transformative, shape-shifting aspect to them, and seeing the animation in these moments is mesmerizing, especially considering this shit was all hand-drawn, frame by frame. But more on that later. Moving along to run and gun levels, these are closer to something like Metal Slug or Contra, where you need to work your way through a stage until reaching a finish line of sorts. Bravo! Fighting through enemies and mini bosses along the way. Run and guns are also the primary way of collecting coins in the game. These are scattered through the level and you'll collect them as you go. Coins are then used to purchase weapons and power-ups. Run and guns are no slouch in the visual department either. The expansive watercolor painted backgrounds and enemy variety in these stages ensure that they never grow stale on the eyes. Then there's mausoleums and the King's Leap boss gauntlet. These are basically mini-games utilizing the game's parry mechanic instead of using weapons. Speaking of weapons, there are many for you to purchase and wield in your murder spree. These range from simple shoot in a straight line, to shotgun spreads, to charge shots, to fucking glowing hoops of death that go backwards. You're allowed to enter levels with any 2 weapons. This wide range of options gives you a tool of sorts for basically any kind of fight you find yourself in. And trust me, buckaroo, you're gonna need them. The next piece of your kit is charms. These are almost like perks in Call of Duty. A lot of variety with these. You've got extra lives, invisible dashing, auto parrying, and even playing as Miss Chalice, the DLC character. These give you more strategic options for each fight, with some being more useful for certain stages than others. Example, Smoke Dash is useless for plane levels because you can't dash in planes, so go ahead and equip some extra hearts or some shit. Dumbass. Charms and weapons are available to purchase in Pork Rind's Emporium. His shops are scattered around the islands. But be respectful while you're in there.
Pork rind don't play no shit.
Gator don't play no shit.
You also have these special abilities called super arts. You get to equip these one at a time. Think of them as like your ultimate ability. They come in the form of high damage attacks, limited invincibility, and extra lives. You unlock these when you complete mausoleums. You get to use these in a fight after you've done enough damage to the boss to power up your meter. Or by parrying. Parrying is the final infinity stone in your gauntlet. This is your character's ability to smack the shit out of things that glow pink. And I don't know what's going on in the world of Cuphead, but there's a lot of bright pink glowing shit just ripe for slapping. This is the mechanic used for clearing mausoleums and the King's Leap bosses. Parrying is also a major part of boss fights and run and gun levels, as each time you do it, you get a free bar of meter charged, which is crucial in these fights. The amount of parrying you do in a level is also factored into your final score, so make sure you slap as much pink shit as you can, baby. So there's the fundamentals of what's going on in Cuphead. Now, let's talk about why I have a serious hard-on for this game. To start, look at this art style. Motherfucker! If you saw my video on the Metal Slug series, you'll know that I coom at the sight of unique, well-crafted art in video games.
If you haven't seen the Metal Slug video, please go watch it, because it took a really long time to make and nobody is watching it.
I'm sure it's well known at this point, but let me educate you. Cuphead takes after the aesthetic of 1930s cartoons. And cartoons of this era were literally drawn on paper and photographed one frame at a time to create the illusion of movement. Ain't that neat? This is traditional 2D animation. Steamboat Willie, Betty Boop, hell, even Snow White and the other classic Disney films were all made this way. The cartoons of the 30s were much more crude in their style and subject matter, and this is where Cuphead takes the majority of it. I almost had it. This is where Cuphead takes the majority of its inspiration. You can even find direct references to some of these older tunes in the game. I personally love cartoons from this era, and so did the developers. Good choice, gents. Now, it would be one thing if these guys went ahead and used modern techniques to try and simulate this art style, but that ain't how Cuphead rolls, bitch. What you see in the game was all hand-drawn and animated the same way those crazy bastards did it back in the 30s. One cheat the devs did use was coloring everything in Photoshop, but they did this because they tested both methods, and using actual ink versus Photoshop for coloring was basically indistinguishable in the final product, so it's fine. If they had actually colored everything for real, it might have taken 10 years to get the DLC. Fine by me, guys. Some other cool stuff is the backgrounds for the levels and the islands themselves. These are actual, real watercolor paintings scanned into the game to create these environments. That's badass. They even built and photographed physical models for some of these backgrounds. Some cool ones are the King's Leap Castle, the Pyramid in the Jimmy fight, and the castle in the Grim Matchstick fight. Guys, even the tutorials are fucking creative and cool. I love the low quality sketch style of the initial tutorial, and the blueprints for the planes and the Chalice recipe tutorial screens are sick. I just love how they use these more traditional techniques to bring the game to life. You can really feel the time, effort, and love that went into crafting this when you're playing, and that just can't be faked. And holy shit, the DLC. There is a noticeable jump in quality with these new bosses. The base game was already impressive as hell, but comparing something like Goopy to fucking Bootlegger Boogie is a night and day difference with the amount of shit happening in the fight. Supposedly, the DLC took the same amount of animation as the entire core game did, with the amount of shit going on in these fights.
I guess that explains why it took 5 years to release.
Finally, the music in Cuphead is also just top notch and was recorded with real people playing real instruments. There's some serious bops in this soundtrack that never fail to get me shaking my dumpy. All of this comes together to create a truly timeless aesthetic in one of the best looking and sounding games of all time. Hey Butters, what do you think of Cuphead's art style?
Neato.
If you fuck with this kind of stuff like I do, I highly recommend picking up the Art of Cuphead art book. This thing is packed out with info on how they created the game. It's full of concept art, sketches for all the bosses and characters.
Don't ask why some of the pages in mine are stuck together.
Next reason why Cuphead makes my peen throb is the difficulty. Cuphead does not hold back with making you its bitch, especially on a first playthrough. Things start simple enough with Goopy and the root pack, but you are on your own after that. Some of these fights are brutal and can feel impossible on early attempts. But this isn't a bad thing. It's fun to fail in Cuphead, and here's why. You get to slowly watch yourself improve and get better with each attempt. It's all about learning the boss attack patterns and positioning to avoid taking damage. Easier said than done, trust me, it requires a lot of trial and error, but it's fun. Figuring out a loadout for each fight that works best for you is also a lot of trial and error, but still in a fun way. Switch out weapons and charms and you'll eventually find the right recipe to make the fight more doable. It can feel like a real slog to get through these fights for the first time, but the satisfaction felt after getting that knockout screen is unmatched. 1 HP in a dream, baby. Completely recharges your battery and you're ready to go for the next bout. Run and guns are also hard as fucking shit. Some of these are harder than most, if not all, the bosses in my opinion. But just like the bosses, getting a little further into the level is really satisfying and completing them is orgasmic. I've never been this happy to see a red arrow. I remember when the game first released, there was a lot of controversy over the difficulty. Even with the inclusion of a simple difficulty option, it was still considered really hard. Shit, even the tutorials had the masses stumped.
That shit was so embarrassing.
The difficulty makes the game feel so much more replayable, and it maintains that rewarding feeling, even on subsequent playthroughs. I've been playing Cuphead since release, and even doing a new playthrough for this video, I had moments of sweet relief inching by with 1 HP. That was rough. And I still had 30 deaths for the playthrough. If the game was easier, I'm not sure I would be so inclined to return for more playthroughs. I must mention that the new DLC items do make the game easier. Miss Chalice as the new playable character makes some of the main game stages a cakewalk. The crack shot is good in basically every situation, and the parry ring charm is just ridiculously good. If you're playing the game for the first time, I would highly recommend playing through the main game first, then hopping over to the DLC island. That's the way the game was meant to be played. Using the DLC items in the main 3 islands doesn't make the game easy, but it certainly makes it easier. Get through the main game with the standard weapons and charms, then head over to the DLC and reward yourself with the new shit. Cuphead does also offer a couch co-op mode, and you can play through the whole game with a buddy. This would seemingly make the game easier, but it doesn't. While the story of the game is about both Cuphead and Mugman getting into trouble, co-op does not feel like the intended way to play. This is especially apparent on the run and gun levels where you and your buddy basically have to stay right next to each other as you move through the stage. This can make these levels much more difficult, especially on platforming sections. You and your buddy really need to be synced up. Co-op is fun, and I have done full playthroughs with friends, but from a difficulty perspective, it seems to cause more harm than good, honestly. Especially when you're playing with someone brand new to the game. So perhaps you found yourself completing the game on the standard difficulty, beating all the bosses, beat all the run and guns. Hey, that's great!
But what if I told you things were just getting started?
After beating a boss in Cuphead on the regular difficulty, you will then unlock Expert Mode. What? Bosses are faster, have harder attack patterns, more health, you name it, they've got it.
You name it, we do it.
To achieve a 200% completion save file on the main game and a 100% on the DLC, you will need to beat every boss on the Expert difficulty. As you've certainly noticed by now, after beating a boss or run and gun, you're given a report card of sorts that scores your run on beating that stage. On regular difficulty, an A+ is the highest score you can achieve. But on Expert Mode, we have a little something called S ranks. An S rank is an A+ score, but on the Expert difficulty. You have to beat the boss perfectly. You have to beat the boss fast enough, with 3 hearts still remaining, parry 3 times, and fully fill your super meter. If this sounds hard, that's because it fucking is, dude. There's an achievement for S ranking any of the DLC island bosses, arguably some of the hardest bosses in the whole game. This was the last achievement I needed back when I completed Cuphead. I opted to go for Glumstone the giant stupid idiot. Fuck you and your meth head uvula. Getting an S rank on this boss alone took me over 3 hours. Am I the best Cuphead player? No, but I'm sharing this to illustrate just how hard it is to get an S rank on an already difficult boss. Now, was I still having fun the entire time? Yeah, I was. I was fully engaged. It was a blast. Stressful, but it was fun. There isn't any kind of reward for S ranking every boss in the game aside from bragging rights, so don't worry, not a requirement for completion. However, pull this off and add it to your dating profile, you're gonna be getting so much pussy, you're gonna have to ice your balls.
This 1 month, I got so much pussy, I had to ice my balls.
But Hayden, how do I get an S rank on run and gun levels? They don't have an expert difficulty. Right you are, my friend. There is no need to S rank run and gun levels. Don't worry.
Thank God.
You do, however, need to P rank them. Yeah, the highest rank you can achieve on run and gun levels is a P rank. This stands for pussy, I mean pacifist. What this means is you need to complete the level without shooting anything. You heard me right. It's not only possible, but a requirement to beat these levels without shooting anything to achieve the highest score. If that sounds like a fun challenge, it can be, but mostly it sucks ass. I pulled this off on an earlier save file when the game first came out, and I really don't have any desire to do it again. Getting a P rank on some of the run and guns isn't that bad, but overall, it's a pretty hefty challenge. If you do manage to P rank all 6 run and guns, Mr. Turtle NPC over here will grant you rewards in the form of a black and white filter for the game and vintage audio mode. Pretty fucking sweet. It's nice to actually get rewarded for pulling off this really difficult task. Unlike the S ranks, I really wish there was a reward for S ranking every boss in the game. I'd be much more inclined to do it. Now, all this to say, while Cuphead can be beaten in only a few hours if you know what you're doing, the ceiling to fully beat everything the game has to offer is very high. I love it for that, and it makes the game super replayable. There's plenty of challenge to go around. In conclusion, Cuphead kicks ass. It has everything I look for in a game. It's lovingly crafted with some of the best gameplay you'll find in this genre. Awesome and totally unique art style, solid replayability, and a proper challenge. And above all, it's fun. Cuphead is so fun. Game is very reasonably priced, coming in at $20 retail, and it's available on like all modern platforms. I think you can even play it in a Tesla. Aside from the DLC, which rivals the entire main game in quality, there are no microtransactions, no battle passes, no paid cosmetics, no online requirements, none of that fucking fart dick bullshit. You get more than what you pay for with Cuphead, and I love that. If all of that isn't reason enough, this game was developed by an indie studio full of folks just passionate about making great games. Cuphead sold insanely well and has merchandise up the ass, so it's not like Studio MDHR is desperate or anything, but I want them properly supported so we can continue to get more great games like this. There's basically no info available just yet on their next project, but if their work on Cuphead is any indicator, we're gonna have something really special on our hands. So, how sore was your asshole after your first Cuphead playthrough? Have you completed the game? Have you ever gotten an S rank? Which boss fight made you want to slap your mother? Head on down to the comments and let me know. Once again, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Later, nerds.
But she's doing the hawk too. She's doing the hawk too.
Oh my God.